life has drawn you here.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Muhammad bin Muhammad Supian. In this video, my groupmate and I will share knowledge and some fact about Region 8, which is Australia, New Zealand, Oceania and Antarctica. Hope you guys enjoy and feel free to listen.
Hi
Thank
guys,
you
my name is
guys.
Mufi Faiza binti Makfairus and I'll be talking about culture history, history of Australia, New Zealand and Oceania or Pacific Islands, and also their colonial development and independence. Hope you guys enjoy.
So hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So my name is Nurdiana Nabila binti Sarifuddin. So today me and my teammates are going to present about Australia, Oceania and Antarctica that is under Region 8. So I'm going to present the organization in this region and also the sub-region. So I hope all of you are going to enjoy our video. So enjoy!
Okay everyone, this is the world map and as you guys can see, Region 8 are in the south side, which are Australia, New Zealand and Oceania come from southeast, while Antarctica comes from south. Next, we wanted to show all of you the map of Australia, New Zealand and Oceania. Not everyone know that in Oceania, we have several countries such as Fiji, Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea. Most of the countries are full of beautiful islands. When compared to continents, the region of Oceania is the smallest in land area and the second smallest in population after the Antarctica. After that, we are going to see the map of Antarctica. It contains the geographic South Pole and is situated in the Antarctic region of the Southern Hemisphere, almost entirely south of the Antarctic Circle and is surrounded by the Southern Ocean. About 98% of Antarctica is covered by the ice that average 1.9 km, which extend to all but the northernmost reach of the Antarctic Peninsula. Okay, now let's move to the introduction of the region. Australia, Oceania, and Antarctica encompass a wide range of historical influences, religions, traditions, linguistic diversity, and economic goals. The region transition zone is from Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. European colonial efforts reached Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Islands of Oceania in the year of 1800. The British established port and trade facilities on the coast of Australia and New Zealand and tried to reproduce their Western culture. The local impact was nearly complete westernization. Okay, next, the Pacific Island or Oceania attracted to the little attention or sympathy apart from exploitative. Whalers and missionaries from United States of America and Britain infiltrated many islands in the region during the 1800 year, but in colonial power formally integrated the island into the global economy. Okay, after that, many island countries of Oceania dependent on external aid. Population varies from a few crowded but relatively small island-based population to the coastal orientation of Australia low density population to Antarctica which lack a permanence of population. Although Antarctica has never had permanent settlements, many countries claim that segments of it and fund scientific research on it. Their findings contribute to global research in such areas as ozone depletion, and oceanic fishing resources. Okay, so that's all for the introduction. So now let's move to the next part of the presentation. After we have some introduction about this region, now we move to the climate region for this region. In this region has three types of climate, which are subtropical climate, tropical ocean climate, and harsh polar climate. Firstly, the subtropical ocean climate. New Zealand mild and humid mid-latitude climate is similar to British climate. It has many of its settlers left behind. Frequent storms bring rain to the islands and snow to the higher elevation mountains. Next, the far north of New Zealand has the subtropical weather during the summer. Summer is the most popular time to visit New Zealand. Over December, January, and February, the number of visitors increase as people arrive from overseas to travel while the weather is warm. Summer holidays mean more Kiwis are traveling New Zealand while making the most of the sunshine and Christmas break. So, the temperature for this region is summer 20 to 30 degrees Celsius and winter 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. So, the average temperature decrease as you travel south winter in New Zealand. South, if you travel south, winter in New Zealand is the best time to visit if you are like to have some snow spot. So, if you want to ski or snowboard your way down the slopes of Southern Alps, the best month to visit New Zealand is July or August. So the location of this climate is totally at north of New Zealand, which are more warmer than the south area of New Zealand. So we move to the second climate, the tropical ocean climate. Ocean is the main influence of creating ocean tropical climate. The windward sides are of the mountainous island experience orographic lifting and enhance precipitation, but low-lying coral atolls lack sufficient hilly relief to cause uplift and support precipitation production. So the temperature for this climate is 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. The temperature in the Oceania are consistently warm throughout the year. Temperature regime are only slightly modified by winds, storms, and elevation. So the location of this climate is totally at the island of Oceania. So we move to the last climate. Lastly is the harsh polar climate. Majority of the continental landmass and surrounding island are covered by ice. The climate of Antarctica high extent plateau is frigid with average annual temperature below freezing. This climate exists along the Antarctic Peninsula west coast and in the surrounding island where the summer high temperature in January average above 0 degrees Celsius. Antarctic landmass is surrounded by the Southern Ocean, fourth largest of Earth's five oceans. Mapmakers based in the Northern Hemisphere and geographers rarely acknowledge the Southern Ocean and simply extend the Atlantic, Pacific, and the Indian Ocean southward to the coast of Antarctica. The temperature of this climate is between negative 57 to 10 degrees Celsius. As I said before, the annual temperature of Antarctica is below freezing. It affected by the latitude with slightly warmer temperature regimes existing in the lower latitude than the higher latitude continental interior. So the main location of this climate is the Antarctica. After we discuss about the introduction and the climate region, now we continue with the environmental problems that occurs in this region. For the environmental problem, this region face the problems of natural hazards and the problems, and another one is the problem of pollution, erosion, and mining excavation. So let's move to the first point. Okay, the first environmental problems is the natural hazard. Natural hazard such as typhoon, floods, droughts, earthquakes, and volcanic eruption that affected various parts of the region. So, the first natural hazard that happened in this region is the 1995 eruption that happened in Mount Ruafu on the North Island of New Zealand. Ruafu most recent major eruption in 1995 and 1996. It was affected 100,000 people in the central North Island, and it led to the temporary closure of the airports and highway. It is because the metal structure and the vehicles were damaged by the ash. Ash in Tongariro River resulted in damage to the Rangipo Power Station. Ashfall lowered visibility, disrupting air travel at times as the plum, which could be seen by satellite, travel north east to the coast and across the Bay of Plenty. So the next natural hazard that happened is 6.3 magnitude earthquake occurred 6 miles from the Christchurch, New Zealand, and it was occurred on 22 February 2011, and shortly before 12:50 p.m. The earthquake killed more than 170 people and injured more than 1,000 people. It is considered as the deadliest natural disaster recorded by the Book of Record New Zealand. This was the second major earthquake to hit the city. The previous earthquake occurred on 4 September 2010 and registered at a 7.1 magnitude. Civil Defense declared a Category 3 emergency, the highest possibly for a regional disaster. So the last natural hazard that happened in this region is the ice melt from anthropogenic climate change on Antarctica. It could open the continent of the settlement and resource exploration, but the corresponding sea level rise may inundate low-lying coastal areas around the world. Many low-lying inland countries in Oceania could literally be submerged. The highest part of some of the coral atoll islands are only a few meters above the sea level, and many have a concentration of settlement on low-lying coasts. Australia Great Barrier Reef faces environmental disaster and corresponding tourism loss if the warming of waters and the rising of sea level continue, and much of the region's corals which serve both a coastal protective function and as a major tourist attraction is under threat from rising sea level, predators and pollution. So that's all for the natural hazard. Now we move on to the second environmental problems that occur in this region. Okay, next, the other environmental problem is the pollution, erosion, and the mining excavation in Australia and New Zealand. First, we see in Australia. The first problem is fragile landscape. The damage caused by the farmer and miners. Farmer in Western Australia felled the trees that previously helped to balance the water table and to slow the force of the wind near the ground. But the result of the problem is increasing in the wind erosion and rise in the water table. So the second problem is wind erosion. Wind erosion is a natural process that commonly occurs in deserts and on coastal sand dunes and beaches. It leads to surface salinization and make large areas unusable for farming. Replanting and mixing lighter soil with clay from mining waste help to combat the problem. Overgrazing and over-irrigation in the lowlands between the shield area and the Great Dividing Range have had similar negative results. So the third problem is mining extraction. Environmentalists and Aborigines united in their efforts to reserve some of the environmental degradation caused by the decades of mining extraction. The Australian government responded with a more environmental sound application process of mining leasing. The government also declared the year 1990s a land care decade, initiate the planting of millions of new trees to mitigate losses in Australia limited forest cover which began during the colonial era. So next we move to the problems that occur in New Zealand. We move on to the problems that occur in New Zealand. So the first problem is the soil erosion. Farming practice, industrial influence, automobile emission, and controversy over the construction of new dams for hydroelectricity generation remain environmental challenge in the year 2000. Furthermore, the next problem is air and water pollution. The common perception of the South Pacific island as a pleasant and untouched part of the world is spoiled by the dumping of oil and other materials from commercial ocean vessels. Several of the islands are uninhabitable after being mined for copper, nickel, or phosphate, or after nuclear testing. Nauru was left as an uncultivable skeleton following the extraction of its phosphate deposit. So the last problem is polar continent. It was the waste from the resident scientific community. It increased the tourist visitors to Antarctica coupled with fuel discharge, occasional leaks from commercial cruise ships. So that's all for the problems that occur in the region. So I will pass my presentation to my group mates. So hope you guys feel free to listen it.
History of Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands or Oceania. First is Australia. One of the famous ethnic exists in Australia is the Aborigines. Aborigine means an existing people in a land from the earliest time or from before the arrival of colonies. Aboriginal Australians are split into two groups. Aboriginal peoples who are related to those who already inhabited Australia when Britain began colonizing the island in the 1788, and the Torres Strait Islander people, who descend from the residents of the Torres Strait Islands, a group of islands that is part of a modern-day Queensland, Australia. There were between 200,000 and 500,000 indigenous Aborigines present in Australia in the late 1700s. They were nomadic hunters living in communities and speak over 200 different languages, including sign languages, and also paint on rocks based on their animistic nature worship. However, they did not develop a system of writing before colonization. Interesting fact, Aboriginal music also have developed a number of unique instruments, that is the didgeridoo, the bullrover, and the gum leaf. Mentioning on animistic, well, what is animistic? It is the belief that object, places, and creature all possess a distinct spiritual essence. These spiritual forces are believed to have the power to make rain, foster natural growth, assist in hunting and fruit gathering, and even to the finding of spouses or partners. It is also believed that they have the power to act against the wishes of people if the correct ceremonies and rituals are not practiced. Australian Aboriginal social organization considerably have three parts, which is the physical structuring, a religious and symbolic structuring, and a social structuring. The physical structuring of society is based on the physical number of people and the land on which they live. The smallest physical group is the family. Several families may band together for food gathering, forming a horde for about 10 to 20 individuals. The member of a group who all speak the same language can be considered of a tribe group, and each tribe belongs to a specific tribal land. During the European colonization, the number of individuals in a tribe ranged from about 400 to 600. Next is the religious and symbolic structuring of society. People belong to a group which have religious leader, referred to as icons, totemic beings, and also as ancestral beings. Under Aboriginal law, a person cannot marry someone else from within their group. Also, in their former days, people did not regard themselves as owning the land, as they believed that it was the ancestral beings who held control over the land. Following the social structuring of Aboriginal society, it outlines the relationship between people based on their age and birth. Boys and girls endure a series of ordeals leading to their acceptance as adults within the society, and it can vary across the country. Some examples are cut to the skin and circumcision. Australian tribes were not ruled by chief, but they had a senior man who might be viewed as the best warrior or being mainly sensible in the group. Aboriginal society has separate names for about 70 family relationship terms and their tribes. That is far more than European terms father-mother, grandfather-grandmother, uncle and aunt. Aboriginals' animistic nature worship, religious belief, and social organization are part of their legacy. As you can see here is the picture of Australians Aboriginal people. Next is New Zealand. One of the earliest ethnic in New Zealand is the Maoris. Maoris are the indigenous Polynesian people of mainland New Zealand. Today, 1 in 7 New Zealanders identify as Maori. Their history, language, and tradition are the central to New Zealand's identity. The Maoris of New Zealand came from the wider South Pacific around the AD 800s that migrated from Tahiti in 1350. They arrived in waves, having set out large ocean-going canoes. Traditionally, Maori religion and spiritual life revolve around various gods. Most commonly referred to are the Rangnoi, the Sky Father, and Papa Tuanuku, the Earth Mother. Such Maori gods are often shown in Maori carvings, especially on Maori buildings like the Wairanui. Christianity has been merged into Maori beliefs with the arrival of the Europeans. Remarkably, the Maori people had no written language when European settlers arrived and had been relying their history and stories vocally or also conveying their stories through carving character acts into wood and stone. Did you know that dance plays a big role in Maori culture? Haka is a ceremonial war dance of the Maori people which consists of synchronized stomping and chanting combined with vigorous physical motion. Not only were the dance solely being used to intimidate competitors, in fact, haka is often used as a means to greet outstanding guests, honor significant achievement, or pay respect at funerals. They drove out and replaced the Moriori, an earlier dark-skinned people. The Moriori are the indigenous people of the Chatham Islands and Polynesian cousins to the Maori. Moriori originated from Maori immigrants from the New Zealand mainland around AD 1500. They lived by the Nunukus Code, a non-violent and submissive resistant attitude. Early Moriori formed tribal groups based on the Eastern Polynesian social custom and organization. In 1835, a group of about 900 Taranaki Maori tribe from the South Island sailed from Wellington to the Chathams with the intention to make it their new home base. Shortly after they arrived, they killed around 300 Moriori when the Moriori population was around 2,000 people and enslaved the rest. The surviving Moriori was gentle and lived by their non-violent code, thus they abandoned the Chatham Islands by the 1870s. As you can see here is the picture of the New Zealand's Moriori people, and here is the picture of New Zealand's Morris people. Moving on to the Pacific Islands or Oceania, people of South Pacific Oceanic Islands distributed over enormous expanse of ocean territory, and they are grouped into three broad geographic categories, which is the Melanesian, a black island because of the presence of dark-skinned people, Micronesian, a small island people, and Polynesian, many islands people. First is Melanesia. Melanesian were the first settlers of Australia, New Guinea, and the large island between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago. The concept of Melanesia began with the 18th century European philosophy that the native population of Pacific Islands, now called Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, Solomon Islands, and Fiji, had darker skin and were therefore a different race than other inhabitants. There was a racial perception that the light-skinned Polynesian were considered more civilized and attractive than the darker Melanesian, and they were described as fizzy blacks. Melanesia is a region extending from New Guinea Island in the southwestern Pacific Ocean to the Arafura Sea and eastward to Tonga. It consists of 2,000 islands and is home to about 12 million people. These islands have been inhabited for tens of thousands of years. The Melanesians had over 1,300 languages spoken into the region, not including the dialects. Papua New Guinea is considered the most linguistically diverse country in the world, having more than 850 languages that include varieties that are based in French. At first, there were no written language before the arrival of Europeans, and so they used word of mouth to educate and share stories. Christianity is their main religion area, though some people still practice animistic. The second is Micronesian. Micronesia is taken from the Greek micros, small, and Nisoi Islands. The region of Micronesia lies between the Philippines and Hawaii, comprising of 607 islands, most of which are small, and many of which are found in clusters, hence the name of small island people living there. Micronesia is made of 4 island states, Pohnpei, Kosrae, Chuuk, and Yap. Micronesia is divided into 4 separate archipelagos and their distinct islands: the Caroline Islands, the Marshall Island, the Mariana Island, and the Kiribati. Also included are the Nauru.
The earliest known contact with Europeans occurred in 1521. Living in small communities on small territories, Micronesians learned to adjust to their neighbors, to remain on good terms with most of them, and most of the time to develop techniques of reconciliation when fight did break out. Micronesians traditionally depend on the cultivation of plant crops and on fishing in shallow reef waters. They survive on ocean resources such as shell and fish to provide food and tools. They use stone for building, fishing, and processing food. Although lumped together into a single geographic region, each of these Micronesian island groups has its own unique culture, language, and tradition. In addition, each island group had their own colonial history under many powers from Spain, Germany, the US, Great Britain, and Japan. Politically, the island of Micronesia are independent nations or territories of other Western countries. Micronesian social systems were based on rank, but for some islands, ranking was quite complex. In some islands, individuals could be ranked highly and have an almost kingly or chiefly status, while in other islands, people were led by groups of high-ranking individuals. Lineage were the backbone of Micronesian communities. Siblings were ranked by birth order, and children within a lineage were also ranked by the birth order of their mothers. Groups of lineage that share a common name or ancestor would be recognized as clans. As for religion, Micronesian people respected their ancestral spirits and believed in the presence of spirit in objects. The third inhabitants are the Polynesian. Polynesia stands for Greek poly, many, and Nisoi Islands. Polynesia covers a huge triangular area of East Central Pacific Ocean. The triangular has its peak at the Hawaiian Islands in the north and its base angles at New Zealand in the west. It also includes from northwest to southeast Tuvalu, Tokelau, Wallis and Futuna, Samoa, Tonga, Niue, the Cook Islands, French Polynesian and Pitcairn Island. Polynesian people share similar environments and were settled by people with a common cultural heritage. Now, about 70% of the total population of Polynesian resident in Hawaii. The Polynesians were outstanding mariners. Their trip stretched as far as Chile, but their mastery did not extend merely to the skill involved in shipbuilding and navigation. It is also in social organization, religion, and food production. They were poets, musicians, and dancers. Their societies were hierarchical, with the highest ranking people tracing their descent directly from the gods. 11 closely linked languages were spoken across the region, include a large number of grammatical elements. In French Polynesian, their main religion is Christianity, though the other remaining belief in animism. As you can see, here is the picture of Melanesian, Black Island. Here is the picture of Polynesian, many islands people. And last is the picture of Micronesian, small island people. 4.2 Colonial Development and Independence of Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Islands or Oceania. At Australia, in 1600s, the Dutch was the first European to discover Terra Australis, a Latin word for Southland. Terra Australis was a theoretical continent first positioned in the ancient past and appeared on maps between the 15th and 18th centuries. Not only the Dutch, the British also discovered the Australia's coast, but then the Dutch and British originally concluded that Australia had little economy or settlement potential for Europe. In the 1770s, Captain James Cook, as you can see in this picture, charted the east coast of Australia for Great Britain and returned with promising reports about the potential of Australia at Botany Bay, now in Sydney, New South Wales. The British claimed for Australia and used it as a penal statement for the first few decades. A penal colony is a settlement used to exile prisoners and separate them from the general population by placing them into an isolated location. And so Australia was intended to be used to ease the overcapacity in British prisons and serve to replace the British Empire loss of America to independence. To encourage free settlement among the less wealthy, the British colonial government began to pay transportation costs for many refugees in the late 1800s and gave them free land on the condition that it can be used for productive purpose. The government also provided the settlers with free agricultural tools and convict labor to help them establish farms, thus encouraging sheep farming. Most of the convict placed in British Australia-based penal system came from the most materially poor neighborhood of British cities. A majority of them are charged for petty crimes. Although tension exists between ex-convicts and other settlers, some former convicts did well in business or government in Australia. As convicts either finished their sentence or were pardoned, they were able to earn a living and sustain themselves through jobs and land grants. By the mid-1830s, most convicts were allocated to private employment. The British established 5 new colonies around the Australian coast, which is the New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia, and South Australia, each with their own main port city and competitive pride that generated local rivalries among them. To add, Van Diemen's Land, which is later on named as Tasmania after 1856, became a separate colony in 1825. A gold mining boom in 1850s after prospector Edward Hargreaves discovered payable gold. It drew speculators and new settlers into Australia. The Australian gold rushers changed the convict colonies into more advanced cities with the arrival of free immigrants. These so-called diggers brought new skill and provision, thus helped boost Australia's expanding economies. The Hougoumont, the last ship to take convict from the UK to Australia, docked in Western Australia on January 9, 1868. It brought an end to a process which deposited about 168,000 convicted prisoners in Australia after it began in 1788, making voluntary migrants outnumber the convicts and their descendants by 10 to 1. In 1876, the Europeans took little account of Australia's Aborigine, and many died from disease and oppression. Smallpox affected entire generation of the indigenous population, and survivors are left without family or community leaders. It is also by influenza, measles, and sexually transmitted disease, all of which Australia's Aboriginal people had no resistance to. It brought a widespread of death to them. The Tasmanian Aborigines were wiped out by 1876, and their number in mainland were reduced to fewer than 75,000 by 1933. In 1901, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, and Western Australia, also joined with Tasmania, united to form Commonwealth of Australia. They were attempts to integrate Aborigines into the Australian life in the 1990s, and it is partially succeeded in health and education terms, making them now count of 100,000 people. Only about 10,000 of that total follow traditional ways of life, while others live on a reservation or have been assimilated into Australia's urban culture. Many Aborigines are materially poor. Despite making up only 1% of Australia's total population, they comprise as much as 30% of prison inmates, a situation they assert is partially caused by their subject to a more vigorous judgment for small crimes than people of European heritage. The most common offense for Aboriginal prisoners was acts intended to cause injury, followed by unlawful entry with intent. Next is New Zealand. Abel Tasman was the first of the European explorer known to have reached New Zealand in December 1642. His encounter with Maori ended badly as 4 of his crew were killed and Maori fired upon in retaliation. Then, British explorer James Cook reached New Zealand in October 1769, bringing British whalers, missionaries, and traders. The Maoris, however, was against it. In 1840s, the territory of Waitangi was signed between representatives of United Kingdom and Maori chief, bringing New Zealand into the British Empire and giving Maori the same right as British subjects. Also, British agreed to respect Maori's land ownership as it took over New Zealand. In that year also, the first immigrant assist by the New Zealand Company arrived. The company introduced long-term settlers directly from Britain, as opposed to those who traveled across the Tasman simply to harvest resources, and the migration was encouraged by the British government. A short gold rush brought speculators during the 1860s in central Otago, and in the 1880s, as sheep farmers are exposed to technological advances in refrigerated shipping, making it possible for them to export fresh meat to Europe. It was because of the success of the first shipment of refrigerated meat from the Port Colemans to London in the Dunate in 1882. New Zealand gained dominant status with a large degree of political autonomy within the British Commonwealth in 1907. But the shift from a colony to a dominion was a change of name only. It has no practical effect. New Zealand gained full legal independence when the Parliament passed the Constitution Act 1986. Although subject to some segregation practices, the Maoris are more integrated into the New Zealand life than the Aborigines are in Australia. The difference can be because in 1840s, when the Waitangi Territory was signed, the British Empire had outlawed slavery and was rather more humanitarian in its method. Lastly is the Pacific Islands or Oceania. United Kingdom was the main colonizer of the Pacific Islands that include Fiji in 1872, Kiribati and Tuvalu in the 19th century, Tonga, Tuvalu, some of the Solomon Islands, southeastern New Guinea, and some part of the modern Vanuatu, which was shared with France. Tuvalu were administered as British colony by a resident Prime Minister from 1892 to 1916 as part of the British Western Pacific Territories. In earlier times of 1668, the Spanish founded a colony on Guam as a resting place for westbound galleons, and they colonized the Marianas. The Spanish taught the Camaros, which is the indigenous people of the Mariana Islands and Guam, to cultivate maize, raise cattle, and adopt Western-style clothing. They also introduced the Spanish language and culture. However, because of the Spanish defeat in the Spanish-American War, Guam and the Marianas, and others like Puerto Rico and Philippines, were taken over by the United States as territories just after 1900s. The French colonization of territories in the Caribbean started in the 16th centuries with the annihilation of native people. Then they exploited their lands in the Caribbean, including Guyana, making the territories to be heavily based on slavery, strong force regulation, and highly centralized administration. Some Caribbean islands still remain part of France. In 1842, Tahiti and Tahuana were declared as French protectorate, allowing Catholic preachers to work undisturbed. And by 1880, Tahiti changed its status from a protectorate to a colony. In 1853, under orders from Napoleon III, Admiral federal despotes took formal possession of New Caledonia and Port-de-France. New Caledonia became a penal colony, and from the 1860s until the end of the carriage in 1897, about 22,000 criminals and radical prisoners were sent to New Caledonia. Political decisions continued to be made by the French government in Paris, and similar to the French Caribbean, the French South Pacific Islands have access to European Union market. The Germans also were active in the area during the 1880s, as they established colonies in the New Guinea in 1884 and Samoa in the 1900s. The Marshall Islands and some of the Solomon Islands, which is Boca, Bougainville, and others were then seized by them in 1885. Not forgetting Nauru was annexed by Germany in 1888 and incorporated into Germany's New Guinea Protectorate. The Germans ruled Nauru for almost 3 decades. Though all of German colonies were lost to United States, Britain, Australia, or New Zealand in World War I. Germany's colonial empire was officially seized with the territory of Versailles, and each colony became a League of Nations mandate under the supervision of Belgium, the United Kingdom, and certain British dominions, France, and Japan, with the purpose of not seeing enough of them return to Germany. That is all from me.
Okay, so now I'm going to present the organization in this region. So now I'm going to present about South Pacific Forum, or we call it as SPF. It's been established in 1971. The South Pacific Forum aim is to develop regional political cooperation. It's been built since 5th until 7th of August of 1971. The first meeting of SPF was initiated by the New Zealand, and it been held in Wellington, New Zealand, also with the attendance of the following 7 countries, the 7th, the President of Nauru, the Prime Minister of Western Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji, the Premier of the Cook Island, the Australian Minister for External Territories, and the Prime Minister of the New Zealand. It was a private and informal discussion of a wide range of issues of common concern, is concentrating on matters directly affecting the daily life of the people on the islands. It's devoting the particular attention to trade, the shipping, the tourism, and the education. However, in 1999, the SPF is being changed name to the Pacific Island Forums, or we call SPIF. The Pacific Island Forum was an intergovernmental organization that aimed to enhance the cooperation between the independent countries of the Pacific Ocean. So the goal is to stimulate the economic growth and also to enhance the political governance and the security for the region through the provision of policy advice and to strengthen the regional cooperation and integration through coordinating, monitoring, and evaluating implementation of leader decision. And by representing the interests of Forum or PIF, members in a way agreed by the Forum, the decision then implemented by the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat. And the headquarters of PIF or Pacific Island Forum Secretariat is being located in Suva, Fiji. So the function of SPF, they effectively implement the directive of the Forum, and it provides its auxiliary bodies with efficient secretariat and support service to provide timely policy and analysis and advice to the Forum and its individual members countries on political and also economic issues. The facilitate sustainable regional development is aimed at enhancing the well-being of the people of the South Pacific. So now I'm going to tell you the country of member that included in SPF or South Pacific Forum on 2020. So first is Australia, the Cook Island, the Micronesia, Fiji. So this is the headquarters of PIF. French Polynesia, Kiribati, Marshall Island, Nauru, New Caledonia, New Zealand, Niue, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Island, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. So now I'm going to tell about subregion. We started for 6.1, that is Australia and New Zealand. It's actually Australia is like a town, New Zealand is like a village. So this is the Australian flag and this is the map of Australia. So this is the Western Australia, the Southern Australia, the Queensland, Northern Territory, New South Wales. So this is the island, small island of Australia. So the economic activities in Australia is actually they have three type of economy. The first one is mining industry. The most popular name for mining industry was Rio Tinto Groups. It's been located in Melbourne, Australia. The type of product is iron ore, copper, and also diamond. And also the other thing that included with the same equipment or using the same material. The additional information, the company name came from the Rio Tinto in southwestern of Spain, which has flowed red since mining began. There's about 5,000 years ago due to acid mine drainage. So the second activity is the agriculture industry. This one is the most popular that everyone know that Australia most probably make the popular thing that when we think about Australia was milk. Because what? Milk is one of their signature product that always year by year it's become bigger and bigger. So the it's been called as agriculture industry. The company name was the A2 Milk Company Limited. It was located in Sydney, Australia. The type of product is milk and dairy. So the additional information for this company is the successor of A2 Corporation Limited. It's been in a New Zealand company and it's been founded in 2000. So the third one is the service industry. So as we know, Australia is one of the country that most popular people going to go and visit. So the company that most people will find is AAT Kings. It's been located in Alexandria, Australia. The type of service they made was tourism. So the informational additional is at February 2016, the company fleet consisted of 70 vehicles. So this is the map for New Zealand. So actually, like I say, like Australia was the town, so the New Zealand was the village. Actually, it's not so far from the Australia. It's just a little bit like we have to go there with either no, mostly people will go there with flight lah. So this is the map for New Zealand. It's the Pacific Ocean, South Island. So the economic activity is also the same. It's also the most popular was mining industry. Only the difference is the type of product they created. So the company name of NZ Coal and Carbon Ltd. It located in Christchurch, New Zealand. The type of product they created was coal, carbon, and the others. So their coal have a unique nature that offer possibilities for end user looking for a reactive. It also have a low sulfur and ash and high carbon content, hard coking coal. The second one is the service industry. The black sheep touring company, Mapua, New Zealand. It was a tourism. So the additional information is that even though it's been run by a small group of people, the company is regarded as one of the best travel tour companies in New Zealand. So this is the picture of Wellington, New Zealand. So the third one is the agriculture industry. The company name was Riona Matriki Forest. Its location is Auckland, New Zealand. The type of product is forestry. They make in the typical year, the Riona Forester put more than 30 million trees in the ground. They are reforested any area they have cut within about a year of their harvest. The trees they plant will provide for the next generation. So like this company most probably been telling that they are a person like uh keep building a tree, like they will harvest the tree and then they will plant it with tons of it. So that is why Australia is one of the. So now 6.2 was Oceania. It's also one of the island of Australia. So this is the countries that located in Oceania. First is Fiji, Kiribati, Marshall Island, Micronesia, Nauru, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Island, Tonga, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Western Samoa. So these are the 12 islands or countries in Oceania. So this is their flag, their flag design. So this is Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Samoa, Palau, Vanuatu, Kiribati, Tonga, Tuvalu, Micronesia, Solomon Island, Nauru, and Marshall Islands. So this is the each country. So this is the like being shown. This is the map where the each country being located. See, it's being a small island, but these are their country. It's all located in Oceania. So these are the Oceania. But see, I told you. Here's the Australia. You have either using a flight to go to the New Zealand, and then if you want to go to other places, you have also either use a flight or using a what they call a ship. So the economic activities in Oceania is a service industry. The most popular company name for service industry was South Pacific Travel. It's been located in Port Vila, Vanuatu. The type of service was tourism. The headquarters is located in the capital of Vanuatu, which is close to the many attraction of island. Like example that I can say is like Langkawi and Terengganu. So same goes to Oceania. So the other activities in Oceania was fishing industry. The company name was Fiji Fresh Seafood Factory Outlet. It's been located in Pacific Harbour. The type of product, of course, we know is mostly all seafood. And the actual information that I can tell is the Fish Pits Kitchen at Fiji. They have fresh seafood in Pacific Harbour is making the fish to become the plastic free as we can be. So far, they have eliminated the styrofoam. There are alone has eliminated hundreds of those containers going into the Fiji wasted stream every day. So the third one was agriculture industry in Oceania. So the most popular is company name was Marubeni Oceania, located in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. The type of product was natural resources. So this plays more to natural type of product and also natural of agriculture product. So the additional information was provide a wide range of natural resources consisting of forestry, chemical, energy, and metal. So now I'm going to present 6.3 Antarctica. So this is the map of Antarctica. What can I say is Antarctica is actually similar like Iceland, where it's a place or a country that is cold country and it fully of ice. So Antarctica global status. Geography expedition begins in the late of 1700th century with Captain James Cook voyage to the Southern Ocean, concentrated on discovering what existed beyond that foggy ice-filled water. The interest of furthering geographic science combined with prestige polity in the late of 1800th century and early 1900th century as the government raced to be the first country to reach the South Pole or to cross the continent. Early expedition and discovery gave way to international political claims on the section of the continent. Territory in the mid-1900s, as well as the establishment of fixed scientific research station In December 1959, thus 20 countries signed the original Antarctic Treaty as a basis for non-military scientific cooperation, environmental safeguard, and international control. It's currently there's 48 parties in this treaty. In 1991, the Wellington Agreement banned commercial mining activities and introduced the protection regulation because they want to protect Antarctica because it's the symbolic of ice, and it also they protect this place because if they're doing the mining activity, the water levels is getting higher, so it's quite dangerous for other people. So in the same year also, the Antarctic Treaty System was established to declare the signatory countries to the Antarctic Treaty have become a governing body. The ATS prohibits any military use of a weapon tested on Antarctica. Some countries did not sign this agreement because they did not have any interest in the continent or did not agree with the restriction. It also encouraged scientific research and exchange among interest signatory countries. Research conducted from middle 1900th century to the early 2000th century significantly contributed to climate, oceanography, geology, and geological studies. Antarctica's vast natural resources are not exploited, and the international agreement stipulated that they should not be. However, only time will tell how long this will last. The main thrust in Antarctica in the early 2000th centuries concerned its important role as a laboratory for monitoring global climate exchange. So, Antarctica also is a place that people or scientists are monitoring for global climate exchange. So the economic activities that happen in Antarctica was only tourism. Tourism in Antarctica grows, actually at first step there grows slowly from its inception in 1958 until the early of 1990 centuries, and it began grow more quickly in the years of 20s of year 2000s. The UN reported that by 2008, there's a more 45,000 visitors will make their way to the continent shores. The numbers is increased with the arrival of studied ice breaking, ships that had landing possibilities, and as a global warming reduced the extent of ocean ice cover. Most tourists reach Antarctica on commercial cruise ships setting sail from the southern hemisphere, perhaps in Australia, New Zealand, or Argentina. The visitor attracted to go to the place because it's the beautiful of scenery and the wildfire it has to offer. As most tourists arrive, the dangers of environmental damage increase, and as now there is no code regulating to the tourist industry. So actually Antarctica is a place that nowadays is become a little bit dangerous because the ice is getting melting. So the water levels is become increasing. So that's all our slide for region 8. So I hope all of you are enjoy with our slide and our presentation. So again, thank you.
Life has drawn you here. Feel the warmth pulling you near. Breathe it in and let it fill your heart. It's like love. Cleanse your soul. Feel it in your veins. Breathe it in your lungs will stay. It's like love. For the first time, you know, makes sense, you know. It's like love, cleanse your